I really hope you've enjoyed today's meeting. As always, I'm blown away by the diversity of the topics covered by today's presenters and the depth of knowledge that was showcased. I tried to sit back and take a look at a common tie between all these presentations because that's what MCs are supposed to do. They're supposed to find a common tie. And this is going to sound awful ridiculous coming from me. I think that tie might be love. And for those of you who know me, I'm anti-emotion. My wife's big hope and dream for me is that someday I'll be able to emote, whatever that is in her mind. So anytime she brings that up, I like to tell her a story that probably many of you can relate to, and it's about the German farmer who loved his wife so much, he almost told her one time. That earns me exactly 0 bonus points at my house. But back to love. The folks we learned from today are all passionate about the dairy industry, but what I could hear in every single one of their topics, they love their niche. They love that thing that their little area that they sit there and specialize in. I could see it with Mike North in his presentation. I could see it with Daniel Olson when he's up talking about forage cocktails. I heard it when people were talking about dairy ventilation. These people love what they are doing. And the cool thing is you get to see the product that comes of that love and the years and years and years of labor and thought that comes from it. It's all distilled down and ready for experimentation in your operation. So I ask you, as you go through the last little bit of our program, grab a hold of it while you're here. Take that stuff that people are so passionate about in their own little specific areas that maybe you don't want to know all the detail, but you want to know, I can take this stuff home. These people love it, I trust them, and I'm going to use it in my operation, and it's what makes us all better as we go forward. So I've got a few people that I want to thank, and I ask that you hold your applause until we get through it. But without our sponsors, we can't put this together. So we're going to acknowledge a couple of those before we move on to the next part of our program. The beer and wine tasting this evening, thank you to Zoetis. The Wisconsin Master Cheese Reception, Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. The Cheese and Wine Stage, Hub Farm and Ag. Appetizers, Wisconsin Cheesemakers Association. Drink tickets from Bank First National. The Old Fashioned Bar from Proactive Technologies. And an additional special thank you to our platinum sponsor, ST Genetics, who is also sponsoring our dinner. Dessert sponsors this evening are AgriKing, Animal Health International, Land O'Lakes, Vandervoop Equipment, and Wisconsin Custom Operators. Let's give a big round of applause for all of our sponsors. And now we move on to one of the perennial favorites of the DairyStrong Conference, the presentation of the Advocacy Award. Please join me in welcoming Marjorie Steve from VitaPlus to tell you a little more about the award and reveal our 2020 Advocacy winner. Marjorie, thank you.
All right, good evening. On behalf of my fellow VitaPlus employee owners, we are once again grateful to be here and be part of this program to recognize DBA's Advocate of the Year. And tonight's outstanding advocate that we're going to honor. So let's get started with knowing more about them. So determination, a strong work ethic, and a fun, friendly personality are just some of the traits of this year's honoree. This person has a true passion for the dairy community and the organizations that they're involved with, and is someone that many of you call a friend. Our advocate values cooperation, which is evident through their involvement in various organizations and partnerships with other farmers for the success of their own farm and for those of their neighbors. Every time you interact with this advocate, you find them ready and willing to help our dairy industry. This advocacy and this leadership started at a very young age. Like many farmers across Wisconsin, tonight's recipient had a father and a grandfather foundational to the growth of Wisconsin's dairy industry. Just one example of that would be in the late 1940s, they were actually one of the producers to first be putting in one of Wisconsin's first milking parlors. So they were right at the forefront of a lot of technology. However, tragically, our recipient lost his father when he was only 7 years old. And 3 short years later, at the age of 11, his grandfather also passed away on Christmas Eve from a heart attack. For the next 11 years, his grandmother kept the farm going by farming with a series of renters and by the help of our honoree, who certainly did lots of daily chores on the farm to keep it going. After graduating from UW-Madison's Farm and Industry Short Course program at the age of 19, our honoree returned to the farm to take over the family farm. And in 1984, as he was milking approximately 100 cows with the help of one employee, that he then married the love of his life. And let me tell you, she is a true sweetheart and an amazing lady. But his passion for his family, his farm, and the dairy community continued to grow. After farming for many years on his own, this forward-thinking producer was ready to make major changes to prepare for the future. In 1987, he came together with his best friend, who'd been his best friend since first grade, and his best friend's cousin to formulate a plan for a new dairy. This included site planning, permitting, and public hearings. A year later, construction began, and in just 2 short years from the start of construction, with the dairy up and running, they were already hosting the county dairy breakfast and a really big open house on the new farm. Today, the operation milks approximately 2,000 cows. This year's recipient is extremely involved throughout his local community, our state, and our nation. It is from this involvement and during leisure time with neighbors and friends that some of his best ideas are born. While having a few drinks with some neighbors, you know how that goes, right? The group formulated a plan for an annual day at the dairy where hundreds of elementary school students from across the county come to the farm for a day of education and fun. This annual event now rotates between our Advocate's farm and 3 other local dairy farms. Our Advocate understands the critical importance of engaging with consumers of all ages. Our recipient is also very willing to stand up and speak for what is right. As a former board member of the Dairy Business Association and a founding member of the Edge Dairy Farmer Cooperative, he has put countless hours into showing up, stepping up, and speaking up for our industry. He also understands the importance of sustainability and was prepared to lead the Lafayette County as they formed their local farmer-led watershed group, the Lafayette Ag Stewardship Alliance. Perhaps most importantly, our Advocate is exceptional at building a team. It is evident that he cherishes his employees and has the utmost respect for them. The farm works hard to reward their employees and celebrates their hard work as they contribute to make the dairy successful. This honoree does everything within his power to stand up for his employees, both on the farm and throughout the community. As you've heard, he's faced many challenges along the way, but he's never let them prevent his success. It is his caring and fun personality, along with his passion for dairy, that has made our industry better. Everyone that knows him knows just how much he has done to move our dairy community forward. Everyone also knows he's too humble to usually take any credit for himself. And that's part of what makes tonight's award so special. So if you haven't figured it out already, I would like to officially recognize and invite to the stage our 2020 DBA Advocate of the Year from Cottonwood Dairy in South Wayne, Wisconsin, Jim Wynn.
Thank you so much, everybody. I don't feel I'm deserving of this award. I know a lot of the other advocates of the year in the past, and I don't think I can hold a candle to some. You just seen a picture of one of my best friends that thought the world of, and it's been tough ever since he's been gone. Brody Staple, he at our annual meeting today, gave a speech about what we've done, and it brought a tear to my eye. I know John and Jerry. I can't believe this, folks. You've totally surprised me. Marjorie said, I got some employees back there. Oh, they're there. This award is because of them folks. They're the ones that do the work. Tell them what to do and they get it done. I am so proud of them. Proud of everybody in this room. I love the dairy industry. It's been a good life for me. Like I said, I married the girl of my dreams when we started dating when I was a junior in high school and never looked back. She did forget about me for a few years, but she did come back. But, I'm looking at the Strauss family. I mean, what Dean did for our industry is unbelievable. Thought the world of him. And if I can be mentioned in the same sentence as Dean Strauss, that means a lot to me. It means the world to me. But Jerry, Tom, Mike North, Tom Crave, Greg Steele, we were on the board for years together. Absolutely think the world of all you. Thank you so much. This means the world to me. Thank you. Mike.
All right, let's hear it one more time for Jim Wynn. Now we're going to move over to our annual cash giveaway. So could I invite Chad Van Camp from Family Insurance Center and Chris Sheehan from CMEX to the stage. Today, producers had the chance to sign up for cash prizes as they visited trade show booths. Now, if your name doesn't happen to be called tonight, we will have another drawing tomorrow morning. Family Insurance Center is the proud sponsor of the first of the cash giveaways for this evening. Nothing better than coming home with a little more cash than you came with. Chad, I think he's on his way up. We're going to let you draw the very first one. One, you must be present to win, so we will draw again if need be. May you be here. Now, I'm going to do my very best to pronounce and read. It's difficult for me. It's okay. Tom Kunkel. Is there a Tom Kunkel? Did I do that correctly? And is he here? Is the big question. Tom. Tom, where are you? Tom, where are you? Do we see him? Going once. Going twice. I think we're going to draw it again. Someone text Tom and tell him you missed out. Pork chops, $1,000. A little easier for you. Kathy Duquette. Is Kathy here? All right, right in front of us. Give her a big round of applause. I think we'll come up and get a photo here along with Chad. We'll take the photo. Just give us a second. All right. She's on her way up. I'm going to also have Chris come over then as well, and he's going to do the next one. We had so much fun with the first $1,000. Let's give it a whirl again. So again, must be here. CMEX has sponsored the Farmer Cash giveaways for several years now. Go ahead, Chris. Why don't you pull out a name? I think, is it Joyce? I had to phone a friend. Joyce Uglow. Uglow. Joyce Uglow, I'm sorry. Joyce Uglow. Did she leave? She just left? Like permanently left? She went home to milk. Oh my goodness gracious. Hey, I'm not making this decision. I stay away from this. They say give it to her. Do you hear this? We give it to her. She goes home to milk. We give it to her. There you go. Thank you very much to CMEX. Oh, he's going to get a picture with that tag right there. We are going to take care of it. Let's give them a big round of applause. Who would have thought drawing names was so complicated? And now we're going to move on to the very last official piece of business of the day as we transition to our keynote speaker. So I want to thank BMO Harris Bank for sponsoring tonight's keynote. Please join me in bringing Sam Miller from BMO Harris to introduce us to our featured presenter.
Thank you, Brian. As Brian mentioned, my name is Sam Miller. I head up the ag banking for BMO Harris Bank. BMO Harris Bank has been a member and a sponsor for DBA and the DairyStrong conference since the beginning of the organization and this conference. Our bankers have a long history of serving the needs of clients across the entire food continuum: farmers, agribusinesses, food processors, distributors, and retailers, and understand the connections that the food production system has and the impact of commodity prices, food safety, and changing consumer tastes and preferences. Our team of experienced ag bankers, combined with our widespread locations, bring a full range of lending, cash management, and investment solutions to dairy and agribusinesses, their owners, and employees. In fact, you could use your app to deposit those checks. Just sign the back, take a picture, flip it over, take a picture of your signature, and you can get that check deposited tonight. For our clients joining us today, thank you for your business. We appreciate your partnership. For those we don't know, we hope to have an opportunity to get to know each other in the future. So on behalf of my colleagues at BMO Harris Bank, and as the father of 2 millennial daughters, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker tonight. Michael Parrish DuDell is an entrepreneur, international keynote speaker, and the best-selling author of Shark Tank, Jumpstart Your Business, and Shark Tank, Secrets to Success, the official books from ABC's hit show Shark Tank. Ranked as one of the most popular business authors by Amazon.com and named one of the nation's leading millennial voices by IBM, Michael is a recognized industry expert and television commentator who's regularly featured across numerous media outlets, including CNN, CNBC, Fox News, Fox Business News, Bloomberg TV, NBC News, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Michael Parrish DuDell.
How y'all doing? I've been doing this kind of work now for more than 12 years. Never have I been to an event where somebody left a conference to go home and milk. So thank you for that. This is the first I have a story to go home and tell people. She went home to milk. This is great. I've been told 2 lactose intolerance jokes only, no more than 2. At the dairy conference. Maybe not 2. All right, 1. We'll stick to 1. How y'all doing? Everyone having a good event? Yeah, good time, good food, good people. Awesome. So I am going to be talking to you today about millennials. Millennials as employees, millennials as consumers, millennials as friends and family maybe. How many people in this room before I start are millennials? Where are my people? All right, I'm going to need you tonight. And how many people who are not millennials have millennial children, employees? You know millennials, right? 24 to about 37 today, yeah? Okay, this guy doesn't like millennials very much, noted. By the end, we're going to get him on our team, guaranteed. All right, so that's what we're talking about tonight. We're deconstructing millennials. As you heard, my name is Michael Parrish DuDell. I'm an author, a speaker. I've worked with a ton of companies over the years, some really big brands that you're probably familiar with, some smaller brands, startups, and I've done a lot of different kinds of work in the past 10, 12 years or so because industries have changed so much. A lot around digital, a lot around transformative leadership. But no matter what kind of work I'm doing, whether it's writing or whether it's consulting, there is one core theme that has remained the same throughout pretty much the entire decade. which is this: helping businesses and leaders build future-focused companies and connect to a new generation, a changing generation, a generation of people, of employees, of consumers that are thinking about work differently, that are thinking about adulthood differently, and that are becoming different kinds of citizens, different kinds of employees, different kinds of consumers, and that, of course, is affecting everybody in this room. So let's start with millennials. Who are the millennials? As I just said, we are about 24 to 36 years old today. A lot of people think millennials mean like 18, 17. They're not teenagers, that's Gen Z. Do we have anyone 24 and under in the room? HR won't like me asking, but do we have any Gen Z? All right, we can talk bad. Oh, we have one Gen Z person. Don't talk bad that much about Gen Z, but if we have to, there's just one, they can't get us. We are the second youngest generation. We are born between about 1982 and about 1996 or so. But a lot of you know who we are as a generation. Here's some numbers that might be interesting. We are the largest generation in American history. Baby boomers, which I see there are a few baby boomers out here. How many baby boomers do we have? All right, we just beat you. You are the second largest, but we are the largest, 80 million members strong, and we are very well represented today, both in the workforce and as consumers. In fact, by the end of this year, we will make up 50% of the workforce. In 2016, we became the largest generation within the workforce. By 2020, by the end, we'll be 50% of the workforce. We spend a lot. We represent today about 28 to 30% of annual spend here in the US, and we're only going to be spending more. In fact, thank you to the baby boomers, we are going to inherit about $30 trillion from our baby boomer parents. If anyone doesn't have anyone to leave the $30 trillion to, I'm right here. I'll give you my card afterwards. We can chat. That's a lot of money, and that means we're going to be spending, we're going to be investing, we're going to be thinking about business and how we support business in different kinds of ways. But perhaps more importantly than any of this, the thing that is most important to understand about millennials is that we are very much redefining what it means to be an adult. We are thinking about these adult milestones differently. We are getting married later, we are settling down later, we are thinking about career, our trajectory, the options that are open to us both in our career and in our personal life in different kinds of ways. And that, of course, is affecting really all of our lives in a great number of ways. So this is a really interesting statistic to show this. In 1974, 3 in 4 30-year-olds had married, had a child, were not enrolled in school, and lived on their own. In 2015, just 1 in 3 could say that. Now, depending on how you read that statistic, you could say, oh man, that doesn't sound great, or hey, maybe that's progress. It depends on your particular point of view. But the fact is that shows that something is changing. And so the question is, we have to ask, why is something changing? What is happening around us that is changing the way that people think about becoming an adult, that people think about growing up? And my argument is that we are entering an entirely new life phase that is being created right now in this generation. We are going through a revolution of sorts within this generation, and it's not necessarily generational. It's not just going to live and die with us. It is something that is going to continue to move forward and eventually become part of our infrastructure. What do I mean by this, about this new life phase? So when we think about how we advance through life, we think about 4 phases primarily, right? We think about you're a baby, then you're a kid, then you're a teenager, then you're an adult. Anyone else have anything to add? Maybe a senior or so, but that's an adult, right? Does anyone have another life phase that I didn't name here they want to call out? Are you brave if you have one? No? All right, good. I've been doing this speech for a while, done it in all different countries. Nobody can sort of argue with these. They say these are the 4 life phases that you go through, and these are the static ones that remain. But actually, that's not true, because this one right here, teenage, we don't have any teenagers here, do we? No? All right, teenage-ish. That's how you know she's a teenager. She is, but she's not raising her hand. She's like, no, I'm not a teenager. What are you talking about? Parents are pointing to her. So the teenager, which we all think of as this really fundamental life phase, this is brand new. The teenager hasn't even existed for 100 years. The word teenager wasn't invented until the 20s. It was never first published until the 40s. The idea of a teenager is entirely new to our culture. It used to be that you were a kid and then you were an adult. When were you an adult? When you had to, when it was time to work on the farm, when it was time to go to college, when it was time to get married, when you needed to become an adult, you became an adult. This idea of teenage didn't exist. How it existed is very interesting. Technology. Teenagers existed because the car was invented. And when necessity meets capacity, a revolution happens, and a new life phase is born. So think about 1910, 1915. People wanted to leave. They wanted freedom. They wanted to experiment throughout the world. They didn't have the opportunity to do that. The car was invented, and that one piece of technology actually didn't just create opportunity, it created an entire new way of living, an entire new life phase. So my argument is that that is what is happening right now, is that all of the technology that is coming together is creating another brand new life phase between the teenager and the adult. And I call it the pre-adult. Clever name, I hope. Brought to you by the makers of the tween. So what is the pre-adult? The pre-adult is, like I said, right between the teenager, right between the adult. Let's call it like 18 to 26, 27. Maybe for some people, it's more like 35, 36. But the 20s, for the most part. And I'm not the only one who thinks about this. I might be the only one with a snappy name, but there are a lot of sociologists talking about this strange phase that's happening in the 20s and how it affects everything. A sociologist named Jeffrey Arnett at Clark University calls it emerging adulthood, and he talks about it like this. Maybe this will sound familiar to you. It is a distinct period for young people, characterized by change and exploration as they examine life's possibilities that are available to them and gradually arrive at more enduring choices in love, work, and worldview. Does that sound familiar to some millennials that you know? See, what's happening is that we have more access. We have more access to information, technology, opportunity, and that is changing us for the better and for the worse. It is creating new paths for us to explore, but it is also creating new challenges for us to handle. And as somebody who is a business owner or working with a millennial or anywhere thinking about the future of work, you have to understand not only the benefits of this, but you have to understand the challenges of this new life phase, the challenges that are created by this emerging pre-adult phase that we are in. And so let me tell you what those three challenges are. The first one is this: an abundance of choice. How many people here think that a lot of choice is really good? Interesting, not many. Most of the time, it's about 50% of the room, right? A lot of people think that if you have choice, if you have a ton of options, then that choice is a positive thing and that you will be able to make an informed decision based on all that. Well, that's not necessarily true. There's a famous book called The Paradox of Choice, but they've done more research over the last 2 decades since that book is out, and what they've found is that too much choice is often worse than no choice at all. This is a really interesting study that proves this. Anyone here familiar with the JAM study? Done about 15 years ago. The JAM study did a very simple thing. It set up a display booth in a grocery store, and the first week it offered 6 jars of jam to people that were coming in the store. And they said, hey, look, come in the store, try the jam, see what you like, and if you buy a jar of jam today, here is a $1 off coupon. Buy it today, pick it up when you leave. Great. Then the next week they did the exact same thing with 24 jars of jam. Same people, same setup, same deal. Here's a table, try some jam. If you like it, it's $1 off. What did they find? They found that when they offered the 6 jars of jam, people came to the table, but there wasn't a ton of interest. Not a lot of people were trying it. But when they offered the 24 jars of jam, tons of people came over. It was packed. People were asking questions. They were tasting. They were really engaged. But then when it came to purchasing, what happened? In fact, when there were 6 jars of jam, more people purchased. How many more people purchased? Only 10% of the people that purchased when there were 6 jars of jam purchased when there were 24 jars of jam, right? So many people did not purchase when they tried the product. Why was that? Well, when there are 24 jars of jam, there are 23 wrong answers. And jam just isn't worth it. If you can get it wrong, you say, you know what? I didn't even want jam to begin with. I'm just going to step away, right? And that is a silly metaphor, but it is a metaphor for what is happening right now in our world, both as we think about careers, as we think about development, as we think about products, certainly when we go to the grocery store. Too much choice is paralyzing, and instead we don't make a choice. And that is something that as employers, as folks thinking about this generation, you have to understand because it is something that isn't going away. It is very real, and it pervades almost every part of our life in 2020. Challenge 2. I promise this isn't a sad speech. I'm going to get you some happy stuff at the end, but we have to talk about the challenges first so we can address them. Challenge 2, a disintegration of trust. I think probably no matter where you are in the country, you can see that there's division, whether you're on one side or the other. That doesn't matter. People can see that there's something happening and we're feeling a little divided. And it's perhaps because of this. There is a disintegration of trust. Pew Research did a huge study in 2016 and found that Americans are feeling like the institutions they have always trusted are beginning to fail them. You see a decline in all these areas. What's really interesting, and this deck, by the way, will be available to you afterwards, so if you're interested in the data, it'll all be at your disposal at the end of this. What's interesting is they did the same kind of survey 2 years later, 2018, and they looked specifically at generational trends. And a lot of information on this page here, but what you can see is, if you look at the top from the bottom, the top starts with older generations where they trust, goes all the way down to the bottom. You'll start to see the gap in what age groups trust what institutions more or less. What you see across the board, though, when you compare this to data from 30 years ago, is that there is a distrust in the institutions that have failed us. And that distrust is breeding a new kind of curiosity, a new kind of information seeking, a new kind of community building. For better or worse, it is affecting the way that we go about our daily lives, this disintegration. And finally, challenge 3, and then I promise you we'll get some upbeat stuff up here. Challenge 3 is a lack of connection, which is so funny because that thing that we all have in our pocket was supposed to connect us so much. And many people think that the thing in our pocket does connect us, but what happens is when we take our phone out, when we're on our phone, when we're looking, I don't know about you, but I spend most of my life, I try not to, but the reality is I do, walk down the street. I live in New York City, so I'm constantly walking and not driving and texting, but walking and texting, which is just as bad in New York, is that this thing, when we put it away, we get sort of a hangover. We put it away and we think that we're connected, we think that we're connecting, our brain thinks that we've established a relationship, but then when the thing goes off, we go, whoa, wait a second, this is actually the real world right here, and we haven't invested as much in this because we're so focused on this. And this lack of connection in our daily life is affecting our mental health, is affecting our relationships, is affecting these things that contribute to adulthood, which is what we're putting off. So really interesting stat here about loneliness. Cigna's 2018 study found that feelings of loneliness are worse in younger generations than in older ones, with Generation Z and Millennials reporting higher feelings of isolation than older generations. And this is very different than historic data. It used to be the other way. As you got older, you got more lonely. Well, now, the younger you are, the more lonely you are feeling, or the more lonely you are at least expressing that you are feeling. So these 3 things, this abundance of choice, this disintegration of trust, and this lack of connection, is changing how we think about what career means, what our profession means, what we look to for our work, what we think about when we think about our career, our legacy, our future. These 3 things are at the very core of how we position this in our brain. And the biggest thing that this has shifted is the metric of success that we use to define whether or not a job is worth it, an opportunity is worth it, a career is worth it. Those metrics are shifting, they're changing, and because of that, a new metric has been born, and it's this, it's fulfillment. It's not about what job just pays the bills, it's not about what job just, I'm interested in, for the moment, or what can build a career, or what's on the corporate ladder. It's at the very core. I've had thousands and thousands and thousands of millennials I've engaged with over the years, and employers and employees of all different ages, and this word comes up in almost every country, in almost every industry, in almost every business, or some synonym of this. When you talk to younger generations about what they're looking for in a career, in a life, in a business, this word is attached to it. I want something that offers me fulfillment. Millennials in the room, you better back me up here. You don't have to, actually. Do you feel this? Any millennials? Yay, nay? You're hiding? If you don't say something, that's a yay. See how that works? All the millennials back me. So fulfillment. Fulfillment is at the very core of what we are seeking. And what does fulfillment look like? Because fulfillment is one of those words that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. From the years of studying this, what I have found is that fulfillment comes down to 3 very important features. Number 1, personal growth. In other words, because of us, everyone in this room, because of us, my world is better, personally, personal growth, part 1. 2, tribal influence. Because of us, every one of us in this room, our world in this room is better. And 3, social impact. Because of us, everybody in this room, the world is better. The world outside those doors are better. When you talk to millennials, when you talk to most people, but I study millennials, so I talk to a lot of millennials, a lot of folks in Gen Z, about what it means to be fulfilled, about what it means to feel satisfied and meaningful, it is some combination right in the heart of these three things. And when I talk to companies, big and small, I talk about how they can infuse these things into their business, into their mission, into how they are growing their business. And there's a lot of different solutions for doing this. But at the very core, that's the answer. That's what it's about. It's this idea of fulfillment. Now, I'm not the only one who thinks this. Anyone here familiar with Fortune magazine? They put out a list every year of the great places to work. Familiar with this list here? Yeah, great places to work. Okay. So every year they put out a list, they poll hundreds of thousands of people, and they say, these are the best places to work. And they segment it by category. So it's not just the best place to work. It can be a variety of different companies for a variety of different groups of people. For parents, for small businesses, for rural communities, for cities, for millennials, of course. They have a list as well. And when they put together this list, they analyze exactly what it means to be considered a place to work. There are 50 criteria items that they allow people to choose from. For this particular one, they looked at 400,000 people across the country, and they said, what is it that identifies a great place to work, specifically for a millennial? And these were the top 10 most popular things stated in the survey about why the millennial considers this company a great company to work for. I'm going to go through the 10 because I think they're important. 1, when you join the company, you are made to feel welcome. And this, by the way, is in order from the most often said to the least often said of the top 10. So from most to least. So that's number 1. 2, I'm proud to tell others I work here. 3, I feel good about the ways we contribute to community. 4, management is honest and ethical in its business practices. 5, our customers would rate the service we deliver as excellent. 6, our facilities contribute to a good working environment. 7, people here are given a lot of responsibility. 8, people celebrate events around here. 9, I am given the resources and equipment to do my job. And 10, we have special and unique benefits. Top 10 things that millennials said this is what makes a company good. And if you go back and you actually look through these 10 things, you can see exactly what I talked about in the architecture of fulfillment displayed. Personal growth. Because of us, my world is better. Tribal influence. Because of us, our world is better. Social impact. Because of us, the world is better. Every single one of those items checks off at least one of those lists. One of those things that says, this is what makes me feel a part of this company. This is what makes me believe that I'm working for a place that I would consider to be a great place to work. And it's something that business owners, perhaps who have a more traditional legacy knowledge of what it means to run a business, make money, pay your employees, they leave, everyone's happy. They're having to redefine what that means. They're having to redefine how they think about value, how they talk about value, how they encourage, inspire, and empower the people on their teams and the people who they will eventually turn their business over to, right? So this is a very important thing to think about. So now that we know this, how do we do some of this? How do we infuse some of these ideas of fulfillment into our everyday practices? Because ultimately, you want to be able to leave this conference and you want to go back to your business and you want to start to implement this. You want to start to, maybe take 1, 2, 3 of these, try them out, figure out how to actually tactically do this. I'm going to share 5 ideas with you that you can bring back to your company, your business, whatever that you'd like to apply these to, whatever business you're in specifically. You can apply these and hopefully see some results next week, next month, next year, perhaps, for some of these. And I'm going to put these through the lens of not only what it means to hire, train, and retain millennials as employees, but some of this is a consumer piece too. So if you're consumer focused, that will help you. The first one is this. You have to develop touch points that are personal and purposeful. And I know this always gets some eye rolls, especially from more traditional businesses where they're like, personal and purposeful, come on. Like, we have a product, we're selling a product. But the reality is that there is so much competition. There is so much information. There is so much access that having a story, having a product that is deeply personal and deeply purposeful is one of the best ways to increase engagement both with employees and with your customers, especially in 2020. Really interesting stat here, 74% of Gen Z, her people, I think you're the only Gen Z here, no one else, 74% of Gen Z said work should have a greater purpose than earning a salary compared to 45% of millennials, 40% of Generation X, and 33% of baby boomers. So this isn't going anywhere, right? This idea that there is more to our work than business, but actually something that feels deeply personal and unique to me, is continuing to climb. It's continuing to become more popular with each generation, and it's important that we plan for it. Anyone here familiar with REI? We're in the Midwest. REI is here, yes? Yeah, REI. So REI, they sell outdoor gear. I believe it's customer owned. I think it's a collective of some kind. REI did a really interesting thing in 2015. They said, you know what, Black Friday, everyone goes out, they spend money, they should be spending time with their family in the outdoors, they're inside shopping, spending money. We're gonna do a campaign that's gonna be the anti-Black Friday campaign. It's called Opt Outside. So instead of saying, come and spend in our stores, we're gonna say to our customers, to our employees, don't spend, don't be in the store, take the day off, we're closed, go out in the outdoors, explore, enjoy, have a great time. Now, what happened? Is that a compelling message for their consumer? Absolutely. But the effect that it had on their internal business was fascinating as well. Here's what happened. In that Q4 period, when they announced they were doing this, right, in 2015, immediately they saw a 100% increase in applications and a 2 times the industry average retention rate. Their retention rate improved and their applications went up. Why is that? It's because they're saying, this is who we are, this is what we believe, this is how we lead our company, and we're willing to put the bottom line up to the test. We're willing to say, we are a kind of company that believes in this, and we lead with our belief system. We are personal, and we are purposeful, and people respond really well to that. On the other side, Surge, which is not a fun outdoor brand. Anyone here familiar with this energy drink back in the day, Surge, Coca-Cola? Any Surge drinkers here? All right, so I am, yeah, we got one. You're a millennial, right? How old are you? Do you mind me asking? 34. I asked for a question, so I'm 36. And there was this weird period of time where energy drinks were not popular yet, but there was like high caffeine sodas that had come out. It was right around the time that we were teenagers. It was Jolt Cola, and then Jolt went away, and Surge came out, right? And initially, Surge actually got panned by critics. Too much sugar, too much caffeine. It was almost immediately taken out of rotation, which is sort of ironic because Mountain Dew had the same amount of caffeine and the same amount of sugar. This was just the bad branding. But Surge went away, except for the people that happen to be in that unique time period, the 32s to 36 right now, 37, they still have this memory of Surge, and they brought Surge back. In 2015, 3 people who just happened to be big Surge fans said, you know what, we're convincing Coca-Cola to bring Surge back. We are going to stage a campaign. They got on Facebook. They got a Facebook group. 400,000 people joined the Facebook group. They raised a few $1,000s. They sent notes to Coca-Cola, which weren't responded. So in Atlanta, they put up a billboard, said, bring Surge back. They got Coca-Cola's attention, and eventually, Coca-Cola said, we will bring Surge back for a limited period of time. That was in 2016. You can still find Surge today, right? It worked. Now, why did it work? It worked because they created a product that was personal. They created a product that was purposeful. Not that it was purposeful in the good way, it jolted you up and gave you energy, but it was purposeful in what they were trying to do. And because of that, they not only got people who were interested in it from a consumer standpoint, but they got people excited about it from a brand standpoint, from a product and brand. And that really is the secret if you're trying to attract that kind of appeal that you need from consumers to stay relevant in 2020. So that's number one. And this idea of nostalgia, by the way, before we go on to the next one, this idea of nostalgia, this is actually something I think is really important for the dairy industry to think about, is how nostalgia is used in marketing, how nostalgia is used in positioning, because millennials, they are without a doubt the first and foremost generation that feels nostalgic and that craves that nostalgia in everything we do. So I was talking to a CEO of a big brand of, I don't want to reveal the company, but a big bakery brand, I'll say, and they were having a hard time marketing to their customers. But this was a legacy brand that we grew up on, right? And I showed some case studies of how using nostalgia, tapping into this time where we were young and everything was great and it was the 90s and we had all these dreams and hopes, and this is one of the best ways to reach millennials and to feel authentic. And there is a huge opportunity, especially in this industry, to play into the idea of nostalgia and to bring back something that feels like home, something that feels like what it was when we were growing up. That's not new, but that's something that's legacy, that's something that feels important to who we were as children. So nostalgia is key to remember. The second thing is this: amplify relevance through creative collaboration. I was listening to the speeches up here for the last 30 minutes, and I didn't hear the word collaboration, but I heard the word partnership, I heard the word connection, I heard some of these synonyms of collaboration. But really in 2020, that is what it's about. It's about figuring out ways to collaborate with partners, but also with folks that might not be who you think of as partners. Folks that might be a little bit innovative, a little bit creative for you, but that might make for an interesting partner in how you do business or how you position to employees. I'll give you some examples of this. Gucci thought about collaboration. I know this is very different than your industry, but there's some really key takeaways here. So Gucci was struggling, popular brand, doing well for a while, but then it became completely irrelevant, and they had to rebrand. They had to think about how they were going to position to millennials. This was happening around 2017, 2018. They came up with a huge shift in how they thought about products, positioning, but one of the things they did from an internal standpoint, and I've seen this in, companies have been doing this for a while now, 3 or 4 or 5 years, and I've seen it firsthand in about 5 or 6 big brands. Gucci created a millennial shadow committee. This was a group of people inside the organization, about 15 to 20, that were in the millennial demographic, under 30 at the time, that really had a pulse on what was happening in the industry, on social media, in these new areas of technology that the executives may not have that knowledge. And they said, you know what, we're not going to give them a promotion. We're not going to say, you're the chief financial officer or you're the vice president. We're just going to say, we want to bring you into the discussion. We think it's important that we listen to you, that you listen to us, but that we listen to you. There's that feedback loop there, and that you actually have a say in how we think about long-term planning and how we think about what we're building in the future. And they didn't pay these people anymore, by the way. They just invited them into the conversation. And you saw a huge turnaround in how they thought about marketing and how they thought about positioning their internal brand, but how they thought about retention, hiring, growth within the company. And that was reflected, of course, in the bottom line. In Q1, they reported $2.2 billion in revenue, and they were up 48.7% than from the year prior. Now, it's not just because they had a millennial shadow committee, of course, but that thinking, that idea, that the boldness to bring young people who may not be as high in status to the table and say, listen, we really care about what you have to say, and we really have a place for you here at this table. That certainly was an indicator for them. They needed to change some of the things they were doing, and that, of course, affected that number and affected that bottom line. So thinking about collaboration internally and externally is critical. 88% of millennials, by the way, prefer a collaborative workplace to one that feels competitive. There is this idea that millennials are hungry, ambitious. Some of us are, some of us aren't, but the ones that are, we leave small towns, we go off to places, we want to compete. Collaboration in 2020 is stronger than it's been in a long time. People want to collaborate. They want to find new and original ways to work together on solutions, even if it's unorthodox, like this. Anyone watch Top Chef and see Tom Colicchio? Yeah? Okay, I'm gonna take no's as yeses. Yes, okay, Top Chef, big popular reality show on TV. And then over here is Chloe Coscarelli, who you probably don't know, especially in this crowd, because she's a famous vegan author. I'm gonna wait for the boos or something, no? Nothing? Tough crowd, all right, boo, we got one boo, all right, from the guy that doesn't like millennials maybe, or that area. All right, so the guy that owns the steakhouse chains, right, Tom, Kraft Steakhouse, and the girl that is the vegan chef, why would you ever see them on a slide together unless they were dueling? Why would you ever see them on a collaboration slide? It's because this past summer, they came together at his steakhouse to launch a concept restaurant called Supernatural, which was a vegan concept restaurant at a steakhouse. Now, 10 years ago, that would have been insane. But what Tom recognizes is that Chloe is talking to an audience that, while it's very different than his, is an audience that he would like to engage with. And he cannot engage with that audience authentically based on how he's positioned in the market. And so he can't do that without somebody to start that conversation, because authenticity and transparency, as you're soon going to see, is critical in really connecting with a younger crowd. So he couldn't just come to a group of people and say, hey, I'm Tom Colicchio, I want to have a conversation with you. He needed to collaborate with the right partner in the right kind of way that would allow him to have an authentic conversation with this new audience that he was really hoping to provide opportunities for, to inspire and to empower. And this collaboration worked. It felt relevant, it felt real, and it was a success. So that's what I mean by creative collaborations. It's not necessarily the people that you think you should be collaborating with. It's not necessarily the people that you have a history of collaborating with. Certainly bring them to the table. But there's also another group. There's a group of people that you may have never thought to talk to, a group of people that might be actually on the entirely other side that you could say, wait a second, is there a way that we can partner? Is there a way that we can work together and use our power and use our audiences together to build both of our businesses? Number 3, leverage your product to own the experience. In my world, experience is like the word. Everyone here experience a lot. Everyone wants to spend money on experiences. It's all about the experience. Experiences. It's true. You see it across the board. Again, it's an industry-wide thing that people are more interested in younger generations in spending money on experiences than they are necessarily on those luxury items. Now, like I said, I live in New York City. I was born and raised in Florida, so that's not where I'm from, but I've lived there for the past 15 years or so. And every year at around, when is it? When's apple picking season? I feel like I have farm people here. When are the apples ready? October, fall. All right, so around fall, my Instagram starts to completely fill up with the same picture that everyone's taking, which is like a couple or like one person or maybe some kids at an orchard in upstate New York, like an hour away, with an apple. And if you go to the orchard, as I've been to the orchard, what you find is that, for better or worse, it's full of people standing by trees taking pictures. They're picking apples, but they're mainly taking pictures. And it's not a free experience. You have to pay to get in, you have to pay per apple, it's like a whole thing. But the fact is that going to an orchard in New York City and picking an apple is an experience that people are worth paying money for because we live just with buildings, and if you see a tree, it's an amazing thing, right? So people are interested in the experience, which means you as a business have to think about what experience you're creating and how your product is not really a product, but it's a vehicle to a larger event, to a larger experience. What's an example of this? Well, in the consumer world, it's this, and I picked this because it's a dairy crowd. Anyone here know the Museum of Ice Cream? Okay, Museum of Ice Cream started by a friend of mine, actually. We were sitting in an office in a co-working space about 3 years ago when they pushed go on this, what was supposed to be a 2 to 3 week, sort of like a pop-up shop, where they had a couple of ice cream sponsors, they created some cool Instagrammable moments like this, and they said, hey, we're gonna run this thing over the summer. They had no idea what was gonna happen, and they put their own money into it. In fact, when they hit go on the tickets, my buddy turned to me and was like, I think I am losing all my money. Like, I don't think this is gonna work. I don't think people are gonna do it. Just the opposite. They sold out within 2 days. They opened pop-up locations all around the country. They just opened about 3 or 4 weeks ago, an actual location, like a retail location in New York City. The company was just valued at over $200 million, right? That was just a few years ago this happened, $200 million. And they don't even make ice cream. That's the thing, they don't even make ice cream. So the question is this, why wasn't Ben & Jerry's thinking about this? Why wasn't any Breyers, why wasn't any ice cream brand thinking about not just their product, but the larger piece? What does their product mean in the eyes of the consumer? Their product isn't just a product. It's never just a product, not anymore. It's about the experience that product creates, bridging that gap between product and experience. People aren't thinking about products that way, but it's critical if you want to stay relevant to think about how that fits in the story and the event of our life. From an internal standpoint, and this is just as important, Miller Beer did something interesting. In around 2005, they realized there was a decline in workplace happiness and workplace satisfaction that affected the product, that affected the bottom line. They had a hard time figuring out what it was. And what they realized was the reason why people went to work at this place was because they loved the story of what Miller meant. They loved making beer. They loved the craft process. They loved the art of making beer. But that was something that had been put on the back burner for a long time. They were focused on numbers, they were focused on productivity. There's all these business trends that you focus on and you forget the point of the whole thing. And Miller realized they forgot the point of the whole thing. The point was about what you do, why you show up to work, the work that you do. So they invested heavily in an internal brand relaunch to think more about when their employees come to work, what does it mean to work at a place like this? They hung up huge posters of employees' heads on not just their heads, that would be creepy, their heads and their bodies, in the factory. They launched a whole thing called I Make Miller Time. They actually published books, came up with merch. Now if you go online on eBay, you can find that I Make Miller Time merch for a lot of money. People are selling it because it's now very coveted. But they changed the way that work was done internally, and they said, you know what, we're gonna go back to our roots. We're gonna focus on not just what we do, but why we do it in the first place. And that was a strong enough proposition to change the way that people thought about work at the Miller plant and to create a very successful business for them that they were able to use for the next 10 years or so. Here's what we know about internal branding and about thinking about the event and the experience of work differently. 80% of talent acquisition managers believe that employer branding has a significant impact on the ability to hire great talent, right? So as we think about this as an event, as your business as an event, we can't deny that in this day and age, with all the access to platforms and storytelling, our businesses are really just a story at first to the person who's going to either work for your company or the person that's going to buy from you. It's a story about what you do, who you are, why you do it, when you show up. And the internal brand that you create is just as important if you're looking to retain talent, if you're looking to find talent, because those folks are looking online. Those folks are talking to people in their communities, and they're finding out what you're about. And if you don't tell them, if you don't create that story for them, that story will be created for you. So thinking bigger than product, thinking bigger than service, but focusing on what is the event, what is the experience in the lives of your employees, in the lives of your consumers. Those are the things that are going to make your product really stick. 4, and this is a really good one because it's really tactical. Make them do good, look good, or feel good. A lot of times I talk to companies that try and convince their customers, their consumers, their end user, whoever it might be, to do something that they need to do, not something that they want to do. A really good example of that is dentists. So if you look at dentists and millennials, really tough business. Millennials don't go to the dentist, and that's bad. We're going to lose our teeth very quickly, especially with all the ice cream we're eating at the Museum of Ice Cream. Why is that? If you look at the industries that are failing with the younger generations, it's because the industries are not offering up an immediate gratification value proposition. They're not showing us how by doing this we look good, feel good, or do good. Now, of course, if you take care of your teeth over time, you look good. Duh. But that's an over time thing, right? The value proposition that immediately puts do good, look good forward, feel good forward, is the one that wins. So how does this translate to real world examples? Anyone here staying with me in the Hilton? Yeah? The Hilton will be glad to know they're in my presentation. Talk about the great places to work list. Hilton has, their new CEO took over in 2014 maybe, 15? Not that long ago. Changed the company. They have been at the top of every culture award, great place to work award. They have invested so heavily in their employees, in their culture, and that investment has already started to pay off. They are already seeing the money that they're saving with hiring, with trying to retain employees, all of the cost that comes with losing a great employee. They're seeing that savings happen already, and it's just been a few years since they launched this campaign. Hilton does a lot of things right. I could do a whole speech on the things they're doing internally, that's right. But I'm just going to give you 3 things that they've led with that have created a lot of news in the industry. 3 programs: Thrive at Hilton, Go Hilton, and Heart of the House Experience. So the first one, the Thrive, they offer a 4-week paid sabbatical for 12 employees every year. That is just a sabbatical to do something, not to go be lazy and sit on the couch, but to do something that you've always wanted to do that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to do because you've had to pay the bills every day, every month, you've had to focus on building a career for your family, and you've never had the opportunity to get out and do the mission thing that you want to do or go help in a way that you want to help and haven't been able to. So they say, look, apply through this program. Every year we're going to choose 12 people. For 4 weeks, you're fully paid. Go out and do the thing that you're passionate about, that you love. Does that cost them money? Sure. But does that keep satisfaction within their company? Do employees feel like, hey, they're really looking out for us because they're offering this? Yes. And ultimately, does it make them feel good? It does. This next one here, this program they offer, obviously they're going to offer discounts to the people that work at the companies when it comes to their hotel stays, but they do more than that. They don't just offer the discounts to the people that work there. They offer it to just the friends and the family as well. So they broaden that to allow their employees to feel generous. Their employees can say, hey, I work at Hilton. You can get nights off. They've offered 7.6 million discounted stays to friends and families at Hilton. And again, does that cost them? Yes. Is it free for the people? No. They have to pay at cost. So they're not losing money every night. It's a neutral cost. But what they're doing is they're enabling their employees to do something that is generous. They're enabling their employees to share with their friends and family, and then again to say, isn't it great that we work here? We should continue to work here. We should continue to invest in the company because the company invests in us. And finally, this last program here, this started a couple years ago. They've made a huge investment and a commitment to improving the back of the house operations. So not just what we see as guests at the hotel, but what's happening for the service workers in the background, the cafeterias, the learning and development programs, the paint on the wall, the paternity leave, the maternity leave, all the stuff that maybe we wouldn't see if we were there every day, but the folks who work there experience on a daily basis. They've made a huge commitment in changing, really investing in the infrastructure of those programs. They've already done it to 500 locations. They have another 200 left to do. But when you look at this and you scale all the way back, what you see is this do good, look good, feel good in each of these, right? It allows your employees to do something that feels good to them. It allows your employees to look good to their friends and families. It allows your employees to feel good about going to work every day and about what they do and where they show up and their environment. Right? These are really critical things if you want to attract the talent and retain the talent that you need to build a business that can withstand the test of time. This also, of course, is seen in the consumer market. Really interesting. This was a study done, over 500,000 millennials were polled. And why I often say these numbers is because, this day and age, I could do a survey tonight and publish it online, and I could poll 20 people. And it could say, well, 90% of Americans like this shoe instead of that shoe. You have to really look at the numbers. And so I try to use only data that has a broad group of people that have been polled, because that's really where you start to see the trends. Over 500,000 people, Nielsen did this. Top 10 brands in the CPG category on the way up with millennials. Take a look at them. Lip balm, Kind Bars, pistachios, yogurt. Hey, that's good for you. Naked Juices, Downy Unstoppable In-Wash Scent Boosters, Oats Yogurt, 2 yogurts, 2 for dairy. Nail polish, Tide Pods, the little detergent pods that you shouldn't eat. And Dove Men and Care deodorant, right? So what do all these have in common? They are one of the 3 I listed. Do good, feel good, or look good. That really is what it's about. So if you scale all the way back and you say, as we offer things to our employees, as we offer things to our customers, are we trying to tell them what they need, or are we trying to tell them what they want? Because in this day and age, it's more of your job to tell them what they want and let them decide what they're going to need, because ultimately that's what's going to happen anyway. And finally, 5, and then we're going to get to some Q&A. The 5, increase trust through bold positioning and through radical transparency. So I talked about this in the first principle, but this is, it's worth focusing entirely on this in this one here. More than ever, transparency, authenticity, the way that you talk to somebody, the way that you position your product, and the way that you're willing to be bold or not be bold says everything about what kind of customer, what kind of employee you are going to attract. There is more opportunity now for businesses, for leaders, to say what they feel, to say what they want to say, and to not be stifled by a lot of the things that have stifled them in the past, and to come out and to stand by something and to take a point of view. You see this politically on both sides, and I promise you I will not talk about politics on this stage. I talk about politics on no stage, so we can all rest easily. An example from both sides of the line here. Hobby Lobby, they did a big campaign. They've done this for a while now, but they say, look, we have a right as a business to say what kind of healthcare we're going to provide, to infuse our religious beliefs into our offerings, and they have attracted attention there. On the other side, Nike says, hey, we support these people who are fighting for the social justice warriors and all that. You see 2 very bifurcated groups of people who are being represented and who are being spoken to. But what's interesting is that both of the campaigns, when a Hobby Lobby, Chick-fil-A thing happens, and when a Nike thing happens, when there's a controversy, you see business shoot up. You see morale actually shoot up, not always right away, but slowly over time it starts to shoot up. It's because the company is saying, this is what we believe. And even if it's not something that is popular, just saying that, this is what we believe. If you believe it too, come on over. That's powerful when everyone's hedging. That's powerful when you see so much, kind of positioning and just to say who you are and what you stand for and what you mean and why you exist. Sometimes that is enough. And companies across the board have shown that that is a strong enough value proposition for their employees and for their customers, popular or not. 86% of surveyed consumers think that transparency from business is more important than ever. And 40% of that attribute the importance of influence to social media, right? So again, access to information, access to the folks around us, to seeing things, to experiencing things that other generations never had access to experience in such high volume. This is creating that need for us to align ourselves with something that feels like us, that feels real, that feels tangible. Salesforce is the last example I'm going to use, a great example of how they do this sort of radical transparency. They have a big annual meeting, huge company, where they bring in 300 of their top people. It is the top executive meeting every year. And normally at a company, when you have a top executive meeting, I speak at a lot of these kind of things, it's 300 people in a room with people like me doing things like this. And the people on the outside, they don't really have access to it. The conversations we have in this room, they might get some notes, maybe they'll get a deck, but they're not involved, right? Salesforce said, you know what, we're going to change that. We're going to bring our executives in, we're going to turn the cameras on, we're going to put the screens up, we're going to open the internet lines, and we are going to allow our employees, whoever would like to join, to log in and to watch everything in real time. The meetings, the conversations, the lunches, not only watch, but comment. These screens are gonna have access. People can go on and type comments, and they can ask questions of us. We're gonna answer some of them we can't get to. But the fact is it's an open door policy in how they think about business. That may not work for your company, but for what Salesforce has realized is that by offering that transparency, by saying we are willing to open the doors and to allow you a seat at the table to listen, to hear, to be a part of these big strategic conversations, we are being transparent to you as our employees. We are offering you the kind of radical candor that makes you loyal to our customer. So it's companies like this that are willing to think a little bit differently about how they communicate and how they are able to actually bring the people that they work with into the room and to actually be candid and authentic with them in different ways that are relevant to somebody in 2020. So those are the 5 things. We're going to open up the discussion for questions. I just want to leave you with one more point. And the point is this. Everything I talked about today, and I can't believe it's already been 45 minutes. That's wild. Everything I talked about today is a lot of the trends that you see are filtered through one of 3 lenses. Lens 1 is this. Is it situational? Right? So is what we're experiencing, is the disruption we're experiencing situational? Is it generational? Or is it transformational? So a situational situation, a situational trend, a situational disruption would be this, a situational fact. A lot of people say, they used to say, not so much these days, you know, millennials, they're broke. We're trying to sell a product, millennials are broke. Well, millennials are still in their 20s. They're still paying off student loans. They're still young. Most people in their 20s are probably broke. It's a situational thing. Gen Z is gonna be broke in their 20s. Baby boomers, you were broke in your 20s. You're in your early 20s, you're young, you're broke, right? Situational. I don't pay that much attention to that. Generational. Something that is generational is this. Millennials are the only generation in the history of man, and we will be the only generation, to have 1 foot in analog and 1 foot in digital. What does that mean? I can still remember when there was a landline. We had one. And I even remember the rotary thing. It went brrr, brrr. But I also started text messaging when I was in college. Now, why does that matter? It matters because the generation before us, in their prime developmental phase, they didn't have access to the kind of technology that my generation had. They're analog, and everyone before, analog. The generation after us, the Gen Z, they're digital. They don't remember landline. They don't remember what it was like to go to a library. They don't remember. We are this strange generation that can somehow straddle the two, which is why the nostalgia thing is really important with this generation. And because of that, that is a generational trend. That's a generational fact. Again, it's interesting. I don't pay that much attention to those things because they're too specific. The stuff that I talked about today and the stuff that I hope stays with you are the transformational things. And the transformational things are the things that start with a generation, perhaps the generation is the early adopter, and then bleeds out to all of the other generations in some way or another. So a lot of the stuff I talked to you about today, yeah, it was spawned by millennials. It was championed by millennials. But in reality, it's stuff that almost every generation would appreciate in the workforce, right? More openness, more candor, a product that's more personal and purposeful, collaboration in new and different ways. This is stuff that, although it's being in demand by millennials, is actually something that everyone would like. And if we can find creative, on-brand ways to infuse that into our businesses, to our products and our services, and the way we deal with employees and customers on a regular basis, we will have a stronger business, a stronger company, and something that is capable of lasting through any kind of change and any kind of disruption. So with that, I want to say thank you, and I want to open the floor for questions. You can ask me anything you'd like. Like how I talk for 50 minutes so fast and never stop. Who's first?
We would ask that you come up to the microphones that are placed halfway through the room here. If you have a question, just step on up, and please fire your questions.
And it doesn't have to be millennial. You can talk about change, future focus. I wrote the books for Shark Tank, so if you like Shark Tank, you can ask about gossip from the set. Worked with all the sharks. I can give you the good gossip. Turn the cameras off for that. Yeah, in the front.
Thanks so much for your speech. You can see me, you've got the advantage, but I think if you can hear me, you'll find out from my questions I'm probably a baby boomer.
I figured you were a baby boomer, yeah. Baby boomers are usually ones that ask questions, by the way. Millennials don't pipe up.
So here you talked a lot about managing millennials.
Yeah.
I want to ask the question about how do you manage a business with millennials, and it goes like this. Oh, you've been here for a while, you're doing great, take a weekend off and go and climb the mountains and, feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
Well, if I don't need you to do the work when you're climbing the mountains, I don't need you when you're not climbing the mountains, or who's going to do the work while you're gone?
Yeah.
And in an era of 3-point-something unemployment rate, who's going to do the work when you're gone? Because they can't hire somebody to do the work when you're gone. And the other part is, make people feel good about themselves. We try really hard on this on the dairy. We give hooded sweatshirts out, and everybody gets new reflective vests, and they feel good about themselves. And we've done such a good job with it. We've turned them into a culture of entitlement at the workplace, right? How's that fine line from feeling good about myself to my nice new jacket has a rip in it, get me a new one.
Yeah.
Type of a culture of entitlement. And I guess that's kind of wraps it up. How do we old farts deal with them in that?
Well, there you go. You said it, so I didn't have to.
economic
Thank you for that. So like I said, I've been talking about millennials for over a decade, and almost always the one of the first three questions is this question just framed a little differently, which is like, how do we deal with this group of people that they're experiencing the world and they're demanding things that we never experienced and we never demanded, and we're not happy about it, and they want trophies for everything, and how am I supposed to do that? Kind of the question, yeah? Okay. So the first part of it is what I usually do is I usually say, you're right. And it's...
Who's going to milk the cows?
You're right.
That's the issue. We can't turn
Right.
it off.
You're right. So the first thing is to acknowledge it and to say, you're right. The employees that are younger and that are in this generation now, they're asking for things that would be considered unreasonable maybe 20 years ago, and certainly something that you probably didn't have access to. So you're seeing that accurately, and I think that's the first piece of it, is people are often like, am I seeing this right? Am I accurate in this? Because it feels to me, right? And so you are correct. The second question, but that's also saying that's like arguing, is technology a good thing? We could argue it all day, but it's here, it's probably not going to change, and the better conversation is, all right, well, technology's here, it's changed everything, how do we manage? And so that's the second part of your question, how do we manage? And it's tough, because the key to manage that is to be able to communicate effectively to your employees the why. So especially for folks, the people that you work with, would you say that it's like an entry-level position that you see this the most in, or across the board in all different?
Well, as the primary dairy producers in the room, we have a Hispanic workforce, and let me be clear, I don't believe the color of your skin or the language that you speak makes the difference on this conversation.
Sure.
But the entry-level workforce presents a bit of a problem, and also as it relates to our senior workforce, who are a little more did you get it, or you want me to say it again?
I can repeat it back. So it's affecting primarily entry-level employees. It can be a cultural thing sometimes. It often can affect perhaps one notch above entry level, but it tends to be, it's not affecting senior leadership because they understand the business and they understand that, right? So as a leader, as a manager, unfortunately, it lies with you and with your employees to figure out how to communicate the why that is understood within your organization from senior leadership that may not be understood at the entry level, why it matters. And it sounds so simple, and this almost sounds like it's patronizing to say to somebody, you understand that if you're gone for 2 weeks, the farm doesn't run, right? But you have to remember why this matters is because think about the feedback loop that millennials are used to. And I don't mean to paint us as a generation that's dunce or whatever. We're not. But you have to remember the amount of communication that we grew up on, that we received. The instant message was born when I was in 6th grade. When I went home from school, I'm used to going like this, boop, and getting feedback, boop, and getting feedback. Of course, that idea translates, as we get older, into who we are as employees. We expect, it doesn't have to be positive feedback, but we expect more feedback, more communication than other generations, and your problem may be solved in just increasing the amount of communication and the ways that you're communicating these fundamental things that you think they would assume, but that perhaps they've never thought of. Now, if it's something that is pervasive, what I would say is you need to enlist somebody in your organization that feels like a peer and that feels like because any managerial program today will tell you younger generations, especially millennials, learn best in a coaching environment and learn best peer-to-peer, right? And so if somebody who appears to be older or much higher on the org chart is telling me to do something, as opposed to somebody that feels more relatable, who is talking to me as a coach, or I feel like I can actually turn, that is a more effective way to reach them. So if it's something that is affecting a lot of folks, you should enlist somebody who's on the same page as you and come up with a strategy that allows them to communicate that out. And the reason why I spent so much time on that question is because I have a feeling that's a question that many of you have, and hopefully that answer was helpful. Who's next? Yeah.
going to bat back at you here because you said
Please.
millennials don't ask questions, so I'm going to stand up as a millennial and ask you a
Nice.
question. So just following up on Gordon's question, a lot of us in the room here as dairy producers do employ Hispanics. Is the millennial spectrum the same across, I mean, we think America, right? But is
Yeah.
it the same across the world?
It's funny, we were just talking about that today when I got in. So I give speeches all over the world. And yes and no. So in Europe, for the most part, yeah. In Australia, for the most part, yeah. Obviously in the States and Canada, yes. Where you start to see huge differences is in Asia. I haven't done much in Africa, so I can't tell you that continent, but Asia is, I'm going to China in March for a bank. And that's always the toughest, not just because the flight is long, but because the traditions and customs there haven't changed as rapidly. Now, what's interesting is if you look at Asia 5 years ago, 7 years ago, and the rate of change that they're experiencing year over year, it's wild. It's becoming more and more like the US in a lot of ways because people, again, it's access to information. So the more information you have, the more access to opportunity, the more you start to, as you learn, you start to demand more things, you start to see the world differently. Point is that there's still a hierarchical system in Asia that is starting to decrease here. So it's very rare that I go to a company that is run like, I am the boss, you do what I say, you listen to your boss. It happens, but like it's just not super effective here anymore. It just doesn't work as well, right? There has to be some level of give and take. There has to be some coaching there. And of course, not every industry is the same, but it's rare to find a company that admits that they're a top-down organization with zero flexibility. If you're that company, you're not saying it out loud. In Asia, all over the place. That is still a thing. There is still seniority. There is still, it's like an honor and respect thing. And so a lot of what I say in America, I can't say in Asia. I've done some stuff in South America, and where was I recently? I was in, oh man, I travel so much. I was in, wish I could tell you, wasn't there recently enough. And you start to, it's like 2 years behind for the most part. The fact is though, is that sooner or later everyone catches up, and this idea that work is about more than work, which is really what I talk about. Work isn't work. Work is no longer just a transaction between you and a person to get a paycheck. That's what's shifting. And there's no argument to suggest that's not going to shift even more. It might go back and forth, but that's where it's going, and that's where it's been going for some time. And I would argue that that's probably a good thing, that the people you want to work with and the companies you want to build are companies about things with people that matter to you. It's just a different way of thinking about business than maybe 20 years ago. Did that answer your question? Yeah? Anyone else? Yeah. Oh, sorry, you and then you. I'm staying at the Hilton, so take your time.
So my question is really a little bit about, we've been on a really good market run here for a very, very long time. What, 3% unemployment, and in my mind that has fueled that ability to be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
I get mad and quit my job today. I can find a job tomorrow and maybe even a better job, right?
Yeah.
Just because that's the bidding war we're in. Because at some point in time we're gonna have a market correction that's gonna bite that.
Of course.
How will that impact this going forward?
It'll be really interesting. It depends on when it happens, first of all. So we are due for a market correction. If it happens this year, it'll be very different than if it happens next year, if it happens the year after. So timing on that's going to matter. I think it's going to be, it depends on how drastic it is. Things are certainly going to shift. And the abundance that we're seeing now, there's this term irrational abundance, irrational exuberance, we are going to hit some hard times, and that's going to change the market. It's going to change how people think about their jobs. If you look at every recession, major recession in the last 50 years, you don't see that there is a strong trend in one direction, a recession happens, and then the whole philosophy of that idea is abandoned and you go back. It's never really how it works. It's sort of like a correction in the market corrects the internal cultural trend that's pervading an industry. So you'll see, like, let me think if I can come up with a great example. I think you can see sort of like the flagrance of the tech boom, where like the rapid, crazy, wild spending and investment in tech with zero focus on ROI, everything crashed. We didn't abandon tech. We didn't abandon the idea that we should invest in technology. We changed the way we thought about that investment. We changed the way we thought about valuation. And now, all these years later, we're back at a place where you look at some of the valuation of these tech companies and you're like, we're right back to where we were, maybe worse. That's what tends to happen. It's sort of that ricochet thing. That will probably happen in the market. When when there's prosperous times, there are many positives that come from that. There are some negatives that come with that too. Same thing with when times are tough. So it'll be interesting to see when it happens, how it happens, and to what extent it affects folks, because I know, especially in this industry, that's something to consider.
The how long part is my mind.
How long?
How long we'll play that out a lot.
If you know who has the answer to that question, you should hire them because, and also you shouldn't because they don't really know, but it's a nice thing to guess on. Yeah. Mike, good name. I was a Mike for a while. I'm more of a Michael, aren't I? I was Mike from age 6 to 21. I'm more of a Michael, though. Sorry, go on, Mike.
I have a hard time getting past single syllables, so I'm still a
Okay,
Mike.
all right. It's only one other syllable. Come on, Mike.
You talk a lot about collaboration
Yeah.
and an environment of teamwork and, this need for ongoing greater volumes of communication, all of this environment that structures this, group mentality.
Yeah.
How do you foster independence and
Yeah.
get people to come out of that to step ahead of the crowd and act on their own, think on their own critically, and take action and initiative?
So I wish we had more time together because there's a half-day version of this, there's a full-day version of this. I do a lot of workshops, and if we had gotten to point 7 and 8, what you would have seen is the importance of autonomy and how you can see a direct impact when personal responsibility is given in certain situations, how that affects performance. So how do you reconcile collaboration with autonomy? Because it's a difficult thing to reconcile. And it's a really specific conversation to your business and to your industry. I will say this, it's about thinking about the moments of connection and collaboration differently and siloed, not in combination, not in tandem with those moments of autonomy. What do I mean by that? So things like, let me just say I run your business, which I don't and don't really know that much about. The areas where I'm gonna look for autonomy, perhaps that is in, benefits, or in what you were saying about the outfits, the clothes that you provide, or the ancillary stuff, right? I need to feel as though, and this is actually an important point, so it's worth discussing, I need to feel as though I have some autonomy within the organization. I have some ability, some agency to choose. Now, that isn't saying I get to choose on everything, because we've learned that that's not a good thing. But I need to feel as though I have agency and autonomy to make some decisions within my role, within my department, within the organization. That does not mean that I have full autonomy to make all the decisions and to manage my entire life and my entire job by myself. So there is this important differentiation between how I'm managed, how I'm communicated to and with, and the sense of autonomy I feel within my role, within my team. It's hard to see the two in this general way. It's hard to see them sort of work together, but when you get deeper into the business, you can start to see the ways they work together. It's not a very good answer, except to tell you that autonomy matters. It's just how that autonomy, and also, if you look at the data, fascinating thing on autonomy. Autonomy matters when someone perceives autonomy, not when somebody is given autonomy, which is really interesting, because the perception and reality are often quite different. And so how a lot of companies get around it is that they double down on collaboration, connection, all that stuff, and they say, you know what, we still need to let our employees know that they have some sense of autonomy. So we're gonna give them a few choices, but it's not full, wild, abandoned autonomy. It's actually more managed than it appears. One just feels, again, just Google data on this, one just needs to feel as though one has autonomy. Sorry that wasn't a succinct answer, but hopefully it gave you bits and pieces.
Yep, we have time for one more question. Go ahead.
We got one question for you. So we know that we're going to work with millennials.
Yeah.
So our business, we want to get a look like Gucci or something.
Yeah.
All right.
The Gucci for dairy.
How do millennials view the dairy industry, and what do we sell them on, or what's your vision of when you hear of dairy and all that? You want 40?
You're really trying to get me in trouble before I leave the stage,
yeah,
aren't
I am.
you?
I'm asking
He's a
that
plant.
question.
He's here to get me. Millennials and dairy. Interesting thing. So how honest do you want me to be? And then how honest? Very honest? Very honest. Okay. So millennials and dairy is tough. There's a big push away from dairy. There's a push on almond and all these other different things. However, certainly there's a huge push against skim milk for some reason. I don't know why, but skim milk is like the devil with millennials. Don't know why. Maybe high sugar? whole milk is this coveted thing, right? Like whole milk is still within, like when you tell someone you drink whole milk or butter, it's a really interesting thing. There is still this, again, maybe it's the nostalgia thing, maybe it's the, you know, we were mass marketed skim and 2%, and that it's kind of like the foods that are supposed to be healthy and like are not healthy at all, like the snack wells and all that. There is something special around this idea of like whole milk that's real and that's tangible and that's not the fake stuff, because there's so much. So if I were in the dairy business, what I would focus on is, and again, I don't know how much control you have, so I might be setting myself up to let you down, but I would focus on the core of it and apply the things that matter to this generation, the things about authenticity, the things about nostalgia, the things about, you know, what is it exactly that you are consuming, and that this is, you know, there's this raw dairy movement happening. My mom like bought raw dairy in like a private parking lot. I don't know what she was doing. Like, Mom, you're buying raw dairy? This feels wrong. Like you should, but there are these like very niche things where people still say like, oh, you know, I need this. So if it were me, I would be focusing on that piece of it, on the holistic, quote unquote, piece of it, and leading with that, not on the skim piece, because for whatever reason, you know, it's funny. Yeah, I'm going to leave with that. So I would focus on the core piece of it. You saw me about to get myself in trouble, didn't you? Thank you. I saw your eyes. And are we done with questions? We have to move on. All right. This is my information. There's my information. It's there. If you have questions that you didn't think of or you didn't want to ask in front of the group, I am like a millennial, always on my phone. It might take me a second, but I will get back in touch with you. I promise. So feel free to shoot me a note. You'll have access to the deck. Thank you for being a great crowd, and congratulations on another great year. Appreciate you having me here. Thanks so much, y'all. Thank you.
All right, let's hear it one more time for Michael Parrish DuDell. I'll tell you, there's one thing I know. I'm Generation X. We've always known nobody cared about us. Not that it bothers me. I'm fine. Doesn't bother me at all. So that's going to conclude our presentations for this evening. We have a couple quick announcements to have you ready for tomorrow morning. We'll begin our breakfast, sponsored by Grande Cheese. Breakfast and trade show will be held right next door, as it was today, from 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. The innovation stage sessions will be held from 8 to 8:30, again, right next door. Our opening session is keynote speaker Marin Bozic at 9 a.m. right here in this room. As a reminder, make sure to check the parking link found in your confirmation email, because tomorrow is going to be a busy day at the Monona Terrace for parking. If you won't be with us tomorrow, there is a bin somewhere outside those doors where you can recycle your name tags and lanyards. And finally, I'll leave you with these words my mother provided me before an evening of socializing with friends. Be good, but if you can't, be safe. So have a great evening. Enjoy socializing with your friends. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.